Good day and welcome back to Celebrity Watchdog, the only channel brave enough to say what everyone else is whispering. Now, I need you to buckle up right now because today we are talking about one of the most explosive family showdowns in recent Hollywood memory. Kim Kardashian, the woman who turned a billion-dollar empire out of sheer willpower and a ring light, has gone absolutely nuclear. We are talking scorched earth, zero survivors, full press conference energy. And the target? None other than Scott Disick, Lord Disick himself, the man who somehow stayed relevant for over a decade by simply existing in the orbit of the most famous family on the planet. Well, guess what? That orbit just collapsed, and Kim K lit the match. So what exactly happened? Why did Kim step out of her lane, set aside the S-Kims campaigns and the law school grind, and decided that today was the day to go full big sister on Scott Disick? And more importantly, was she right? Oh, we are diving all the way in. Stay with me. Quick favor before we go any further. If you love celebrity tea served hot, fresh, and without a single drop of sugar coating, hit that subscribe button, drop a like on this video, and share it with every person in your life who pretends they do not follow celebrity drama. You know exactly who they are. Now, let us get into it. Let us rewind just a little bit, because context is everything here. For those who somehow missed a decade of reality television and tabloid covers, Scott Disick and Kourtney Kardashian were together on and off from around 2006 all the way to 2015. They have 3 children together, Mason, Penelope, and Rain. 3 kids, almost a decade of history. And yet, every time it seemed like things were getting better, Scott would find a new way to spiral. Parties in Monaco, mystery women on yachts, photos that made tabloids lose their minds. And through all of it, Kourtney stayed composed, stayed present for her kids, and kept it moving. Now, Kourtney has moved on completely. She married Travis Barker, drummer, rock icon, full-sleeve tattoos, deeply devoted husband energy. And by all accounts, she has never looked happier. She found her person, she built her new chapter, she is glowing. And that should have been enough for everyone involved to simply move on with grace and dignity. But here's the thing about Scott Disick. Grace and dignity are apparently not on the menu. So here's where things start to heat up. Reports began surfacing, and this is the kind of thing that does not stay quiet for long in Hollywood, that Scott had been making comments. Not quiet, private, processing my feelings comments. No. Loud comments, pointed comments, the kind of comments that get back to people, the kind that suggest he had not fully accepted the reality that Kourtney Kardashian is no longer available, no longer interested, and no longer looking in his direction. Sources close to the family describe Scott as someone who kept bringing up the past in ways that made Kourtney uncomfortable, that kept inserting himself into situations he had no business being in, that kept, to use the technical term, dragging her down into a version of her life she had already left behind. Now here's where you have to understand the Kardashian family dynamic. These women are close, fiercely, ferociously close. You come after one of them, you come after all of them. It is practically a written rule at this point. And Kim Kardashian, the eldest of the sisters, the one who turned personal struggle into public triumph more times than anyone can count, is not the type to sit back and watch her sister get dragged without saying something about it. And say something she did. Now, Kim is not out here screaming from rooftops. She is smarter than that. Kim operates with precision. When Kim Kardashian makes a move, it is calculated, it is timed, and it lands exactly where she wants it to land. According to multiple reports, Kim made it very clear, in private conversations, in her own trademark no-nonsense way, that Scott's behavior toward Kourtney was not acceptable, that the comments needed to stop, that the energy needed to shift, and that if Scott wanted to remain any part of this extended family's world, he needed to get himself together, fast. Let that sink in for a second. Kim Kardashian essentially handed Scott Disick an ultimatum, and if you know anything about Kim, you know she does not issue ultimatums she is not fully prepared to follow through on.
Now, some people heard this and immediately said, wait, is Kim overstepping? Is this her place? Should she be butting into what is ultimately a co-parenting relationship between Kourtney and Scott? And look, that is a fair question. I will give it to you straight. On the surface, yes, there is an argument that Kim could have let Kourtney handle her own business. Kourtney is not exactly a shrinking violet. This is a woman who looked cameras in the eye for 15 years and never flinched. But here is the thing. Sometimes when you are the one in the middle of a situation, when you are the one who has been worn down by years of back and forth with someone, when you are trying to protect your peace and your kids and your new marriage, you need someone else to step in and be the enforcer. Sometimes you need your sister to walk through that door and say what you have been too exhausted to say yourself. And that is exactly what Kim did. She was not overstepping. She was showing up. There is a difference, and it is a big one. Now, let us talk about Scott for a second, because this story doesn't work without understanding who he is right now. Scott Disick is at a crossroads that very few people in Hollywood want to admit they are standing on. For years, his identity was completely wrapped up in the Kardashian universe. He was Lord Disick. He had the title, he had the access, he had the cameras, he had the storyline. And when that world slowly began to drift away from him, when the show ended its original run, when Kourtney married Travis, when the family dynamic shifted, Scott seemed to struggle with finding himself outside of that framework. He has had very public moments of very real pain. And to his credit, there have been moments where he seemed to be genuinely trying. But trying and succeeding are two different things. And making comments that drag your ex, who is now happily married and trying to build something new, is not trying. That is sabotage. Self-sabotage and attempted emotional sabotage of someone who has already moved on. Kim saw it clearly, and she called it out. Here is the part that nobody is really talking about, though, and this is the part that I think matters most. This whole situation says something really important about how we handle unresolved feelings in the public eye. Scott Disick is not the villain of this story in some cartoon, two-dimensional way. He is a complicated human being who clearly still has complicated feelings about a significant chapter of his life that ended in a way he did not choose. That is real. That is human. That is something a lot of people can understand on some level. But understanding why someone behaves a certain way does not mean that behavior gets a free pass. Kourtney has kids with this man. She has to co-parent with him. She has to show up at birthday parties and school events and holiday gatherings and navigate all of that with grace. And if Scott is using those touch points as opportunities to stir up drama or cast shadows on her new life, then that is a problem that needed to be addressed. Kim addressed it. Maybe not in the way that a therapist would recommend, but in the way that a protective older sister would. And honestly, that tracks. Now here is where it gets really interesting, because this story did not just stay behind closed doors. The ripple effects of this showdown started showing up in ways that eagle-eyed fans and media watchers picked up on almost immediately. Scott's appearances at family events became notably less frequent. His interactions on social media with the Kardashian-Jenner crew became noticeably cooler, and sources began confirming what everyone was already piecing together, that the relationship between Scott and the family, which had always been a complicated tightrope walk, had shifted significantly. Some people close to Scott said he felt blindsided, that he didn't see it coming at that intensity. But here is the thing. When you are playing with fire inside the most watched family in America, and the most powerful member of that family decides enough is enough, blindsided is just another word for unprepared. And let's not forget, Kourtney herself has been largely silent on all of this, publicly at least. And that silence, that is its own kind of statement. Kourtney Kardashian does not need to tweet her feelings or post a cryptic Instagram caption to make her position clear. She is living her best life. She is building her brand. She is deep in her marriage and her family. Her silence is not absence, it is peace. And after everything she went through, she has earned every single quiet moment of it. Travis Barker, for his part, has been exactly what you would expect. Steady, supportive, and very much not interested in drama. The man is in one of the biggest bands in punk rock history. He has been through real things. Scott Disick's lingering feelings are simply not registering on his radar. So where does this leave everyone now? Where does Scott go from here? That is the real question. Because here is the truth. Scott Disick still has a real opportunity. He is a father to 3 kids who love him. He has resources, connections, and the kind of name recognition that most people would trade a lot for. If he genuinely gets his head right, if he stops looking backward at what he lost and starts building something forward with what he has, he could write a genuinely compelling second act. People root for redemption. Hollywood loves a comeback. But the comeback has to be real, and it has to start with letting go of what is already gone. Kim going nuclear on him might have felt like an attack in the moment, but honestly, it might have been the most honest thing anyone has said to him in years. Sometimes the person who loves you enough to tell you the truth is the same person who loves someone else enough to protect them. Kim did both with one conversation. Look, at the end of the day, this is what the Kardashians have always done best. They handle their business. Loudly, sometimes messily, but always with a clear-eyed understanding of who matters and what needs to be protected. Kim Kardashian did not go nuclear on Scott Disick because she wanted drama. She went nuclear because her sister deserved peace, and someone was standing in the way of it. And in the world of the Kardashians, that is simply not something that gets to continue unchallenged. The family is the brand. The brand is the family, and you do not get to disrupt either with consequence. Thank you so much for watching. I genuinely appreciate every single one of you who shows up to this channel. See you in the next one.